On a night when the sky turned an angry shade of purple and the wind whispered warnings through the trees, a small family slept peacefully in their farmhouse, unaware of the danger brewing outside. Only Daisy, a 4-month-old golden retriever puppy, sensed something was terribly wrong as she paced anxiously from room to room, her eyes fixed on the empty bed where 7-year-old Emma should have been sleeping. The rest of the family had assumed Emma was tucked safely in her room, but Daisy knew better. Her sensitive ears picking up sounds, no human could hear her instinct screaming that her beloved little girl was somewhere in the gathering storm, alone and afraid. Before we continue this incredible story of loyalty, courage, and the extraordinary bond between a child and her puppy, please subscribe to our channel now so you never miss these heartwarming true stories that remind us all that sometimes our greatest heroes come with 4 paws and a wagging tail. The Anderson family farm sat nestled between rolling hills and a small creek that swelled with the seasons, a picturesque slice of countryside that had been in Mark's family for 3 generations. The white farmhouse with its wraparound porch and blue shutters stood as a testament to simpler times, even as modern life continued its relentless march forward. "Honey, please finish your breakfast. We're running late," Sarah Anderson called as she packed lunches for both her children. Her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that matched her daughter's, 7-year-old Emma swung her legs under the kitchen table, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate with obvious disinterest, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Mom, can we work on the tree fort today?" Dad promised we would. Mark Anderson looked up from his weather app with a slight frown. "Might have to postpone, Princess. The Weather Service just upgraded the storm warning for tonight. Could be a big one." 12-year-old Liam rolled his eyes as he texted under the table. "They always say that and then nothing happens. Remember last month? Severe thunderstorms turned out to be like 3 raindrops. Nevertheless," Mark said in his no-nonsense tone, "we're taking it seriously, which means no outdoor projects today, and everyone stays close to home. Understood?" From beneath the table came a soft whine as Daisy, their golden retriever puppy, sensed the shift in mood. Her warm brown eyes moving between family members before settling on Emma, her favorite person in the world. "Can Daisy and I at least play in the yard?" Emma asked, her blue eyes wide with practiced innocence. Zara exchanged glances with Mark. "Only in the immediate yard, not near the creek, and definitely not out by the tree fort. It's too far from the house." Emma's shoulders slumped in obvious disappointment, but she nodded, sensing this was as good a deal as she would get. As the family dispersed for their morning routines, Daisy followed Emma upstairs, watching curiously as the little girl lingered by her window, staring out toward the distant oak tree where the half-finished fort was barely visible. "It's not fair, Daisy," Emma whispered, kneeling to stroke the puppy's soft golden fur. "I just want to see what the fort looks like during a real storm. I bet it's the perfect watching spot." Daisy tilted her head as if understanding every word, her tail sweeping the floor in gentle arcs. Later that morning, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon, moving faster than the Weather Service had predicted. Animals across the farm grew restless, the horses nickering nervously in their paddock, chickens seeking the safety of their coop hours earlier than usual. Even the barn cats disappeared into hiding places known only to them. Sarah noticed the strange behavior as she hung laundry on the porch, taking advantage of the strong breeze before the rain arrived. "Mark," she called to her husband, who was securing lawn furniture, "do you think we should move the generator closer to the house? I've never seen the animals this agitated before a storm." Mark squinted at the darkening sky. "Can't hurt, might lose power with this one. The pressure's dropping fast." By early afternoon, the air had taken on a strange yellowish quality, thick and oppressive, as if the world were holding its breath. Liam, who had planned to visit a friend, reluctantly accepted that he would be staying home, his complaint silenced by one look at the menacing sky. Emma sat on the porch steps, Daisy pressed against her side, both watching the distant tree line where branches began to sway in strengthening gusts. "Look, Daisy," Emma whispered, "the fort is dancing." The puppy whined softly, nudging Emma's hand with her nose in a gesture that seemed almost like concern. "Emma, inside, please," Sarah called from the doorway. "I need help preparing storm supplies." With a sigh, Emma obeyed, but not before casting one longing look toward the distant oak. Her eyes narrowed in thought as an idea began to form. Dinner that evening was a hurried affair, punctuated by the first distant rumbles of thunder and occasional flickers of the light. Sarah had prepared sandwiches and heated soup, wanting a meal that would be edible. "Even if the power failed, flashlights are in the kitchen drawer," Mark reminded everyone. "Extra batteries too if anyone needs to move around during the night." "Can I keep Daisy in my room?" Emma asked around a mouthful of soup. "She gets scared during storms." Sarah nodded. "Of course, honey, just make sure she doesn't have any accidents on the carpet." Emma smiled down at the puppy who sat attentively by her chair. "She won't, will you, Daisy? You're the bravest puppy ever." Daisy's tail thumped against the floor, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. As bedtime approached, the wind had intensified, rattling windows and sending occasional debris skittering across the porch. Mark made a final round of the house, checking locks and window latches. "Everybody, remember where the basement door is if we get a tornado warning," he said. "Though I think we'll just get heavy rain and wind from this system." Sarah helped Emma into pajamas decorated with cartoon puppies that made the little girl giggle. "These look just like Daisy when she gets bigger. All golden retrievers look alike," Liam said from the doorway, already in his own sleep clothes. "It's not like they have different faces. Daisy has a special face," Emma insisted, hugging the puppy who had jumped onto her bed uninvited. "Don't you, girl? The specialist, most beautiful face in the world." Sarah smiled, tucking the covers around her daughter. "Good night, sweetheart. Sleep tight. Don't let the storm keep you up." "I won't," Emma promised, her eyes flicking briefly toward her closet where a small backpack sat partially hidden behind her dress-up clothes. "Good night, Mom." Down the hall, Liam was already absorbed in his tablet, wearing headphones to block out the increasing sounds of the storm. Mark and Sarah retired to their own room at the opposite end of the hallway, discussing bills and farm matters in low voices. As the house settled into nighttime silence, Emma lay awake, counting the minutes, watching the digital clock by her bed. Daisy curled at her feet, occasionally raising her head when particularly loud thunder boomed overhead. Precisely 11:30, Emma slipped from beneath her covers, already dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt under her pajamas. She reached for the backpack in her closet, pulling out a flashlight, raincoat, and her prized possession, a compass her grandfather had given her before he passed away. "I have to be very quiet, Daisy," she whispered. "You stay here and be a good girl. I'll be back before morning and tell you all about the storm." The puppy watched with confused eyes as Emma eased her window open, the one overlooking the porch roof, a route she had used before during daylight hours for adventure games, never at night, never during a storm. With one last look at Daisy, Emma slipped out into the darkness, pulling the window mostly closed behind her, the increasing rain immediately dampening her hair as she carefully navigated the slick shingles, her small form soon swallowed by the gathering storm and the darkness beyond. Daisy whined softly, pawing at the window, but remained where Emma had told her to stay, her training at odds with her instincts as the wind carried away the scent of her beloved little girl. 2 hours after Emma's departure, Daisy still lay on the girl's bed, her ears twitching with each new sound. The storm unleashed against the house. The puppy had been dozing fitfully, waking at every particularly loud thunderclap, her young mind struggling to balance her training to stay with her growing unease. Around 1:30 in the morning, a sudden drop in barometric pressure sent a wave of discomfort through Daisy's sensitive ears, painful enough to bring her fully awake. With a soft yelp, she sat up, suddenly her golden fur standing on end. Something felt wrong beyond just the storm, something she couldn't quite understand, but could definitely sense. Daisy jumped down from Emma's bed and padded to the window where she'd last seen her girl. Window remained slightly ajar, cold, wet air seeping into the room. Daisy pressed her nose against the opening, whining softly as she detected the fading traces of Emma's scent being washed away by the rain. The puppy turned in a circle, her distress growing as she realized Emma had been gone for too long, moving with purpose. Now Daisy left Emma's room, venturing into the dark hallway, her claws clicking softly against the wooden floor. She passed Liam's room, hearing his gentle snores, even over. The storm then continued to Mark and Sarah's room, where both adults slept deeply exhausted from a long day of farm work and storm preparations. Lightning flashed, illuminating the hallway and throwing Daisy's shadow against the wall in that moment. Of brightness, the puppy made her decision, returning to Emma's room. She jumped back onto the bed, digging at the rumpled blankets, as if expecting to find the girl hiding beneath them. Finding nothing, Daisy began to bark sharp, urgent sounds that should have awakened the household. The storm worked against her, her barks competing with howling wind and crashing thunder. No one stirred, no doors opened. The Anderson family slept on, unaware that their youngest member was missing. Daisy jumped down again, this time moving to Liam's room, where she scratched at his door until it drifted open. The 12-year-old boy lay sprawled across his bed, headphones still emitting faint music. Daisy approached, placing her front paws on the edge of his mattress and barking directly at his face. Liam stirred slightly, mumbling, "Go away, Daisy," before rolling over his back to the desperate puppy. The golden retriever tried a different approach, tugging at Liam's blanket with her teeth, but the boy merely pulled it tighter around himself in response. Daisy's frustration grew as she realized no one was going to wake and help her find Emma back in the hallway. Daisy paused as a particularly violent gust of wind made the house creak and groan. The storm was worsening by the minute. Outside the windows, the world had disappeared into sheets of driving rain, occasionally illuminated by lightning that turned night to brief, unnatural day. The puppy made her way downstairs, moving room to room. As if conducting a final check before making her next decision in the kitchen, she found Emma's raincoat missing from its hook, by the door, confirming what her nose had already told her. Emma had gone outside into the storm. Daisy approached the dog. Ducker installed in the mudroom a small flap that allowed her access to a fenced portion of the yard for bathroom breaks. She pushed her head through, feeling the full force of the wind and rain for the first time. Cold water immediately soaking her face and chest. For a moment she hesitated, her puppy instincts telling her to retreat to safety, to the warmth of Emma's bed. But deeper, more powerful instincts drove her forward. If her girl was out in this storm, Daisy needed to find her to protect her, to bring her home, with a determination that seemed beyond her 4 months of life. Daisy pushed through the dog door fully, her golden fur instantly plastered to her small body. By the driving rain, she stood in the yard, momentarily disoriented by the transformation of the familiar landscape, the rain reducing visibility to mere feet in front of her, the wind carrying away scents that would normally guide her. Lightning cracked overhead, followed almost instantly by deafening thunder. Daisy flinched but held her ground, raising her nose to the wind, desperate for any trace of Emma's scent. She caught it briefly, a faint hint coming from the direction of the distant oak tree and the fort that had so captivated Emma's imagination. Didn't hesitate, setting off across the yard, her small body leaning into the wind, her determination overriding her fear with each step. She moved farther from the safety of the Anderson home and deeper into the storm-ravaged landscape beyond. Meanwhile, Emma huddled in the partially completed tree fort, her adventure having turned frightening far more quickly than she had anticipated. The structure swayed alarmingly with each powerful gust, branches cracking overhead, rain finding its way through the incomplete roof, soaking her. Despite the raincoat, stupid, Emma muttered to herself, as another violent sway of the fort made her grab the wooden railing for support. I should have listened to Dad. She had reached the fort without incident, using her flashlight to navigate the familiar path. But once there, the storm had intensified. Beyond anything she had imagined, the wind tearing at the structure, the rain coming in nearly horizontal. Sheets, the lightning revealing glimpses of a landscape, transformed into something alien and threatening. Emma had quickly realized her mistake, but by then it was too late. The wooden ladder she had used to climb into the fort had torn free, blown away by a particularly strong gust, leaving her stranded, 12 feet above the ground on a platform that felt increasingly unstable. Now, as she huddled against the most solid wall of the structure, Emma thought of her warm bed, of Daisy's comforting presence, of her parents who would be frantic when they discovered her missing. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to conserve body heat as the temperature dropped her teeth, beginning to chatter, both from cold and fear. "Someone will find me in the morning," she whispered, trying to reassure herself. Dad always checks the farm after storms, but a small voice in her mind reminded her that the tree fort was far from the regular buildings, hardly visible from the house. Would anyone even think to look for her here? And what if the fort didn't survive the night? Already she could feel it shifting with each powerful gust, the wooden joints creaking in protest. Lightning illuminated the world again, giving Emma a brief, terrifying glimpse of the creek that separated the fort from the farmhouse. Normally a gentle stream, it had already swollen to 3 times its usual size, muddy water rushing past, carrying branches and debris. Emma buried her face in her arms, tears mixing with the rainwater on her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Daisy," she whispered, though the puppy was far away. "I should have stayed with you." As if in answer to her words, a sound reached her ears between thunderclaps, a sound so unexpected that at first Emma thought she had imagined it, the distant but distinctive bark of a small dog. Emma raised her head in disbelief, peering through the rain-soaked darkness. "Daisy," she called, her voice snatched away by the wind. "Daisy, is that you?" Daisy fought her way across the open pasture between the house and the tree line, her small body repeatedly buffeted by wind, strong enough to nearly knock her off her paws. The rain had soaked through her golden fur to the skin, each gust sending shivers through her frame, but still she pressed forward, guided by instinct and love. The familiar landscape had become treacherous, and alien tree branches whipped violently overhead, occasionally crashing to the ground nearby the well-worn path. Emma had followed earlier was now a muddy stream, water flowing downhill toward the already swollen creek. Lightning flashes provided brief illumination of the chaotic scene, each thunderclap that followed seeming to shake the very ground beneath. Daisy's paws, the puppy's senses normally so keen, were overwhelmed by the storm's assault. The driving rain washed away scents. Almost instantly, the howling wind carried sounds in confusing directions. The darkness between lightning flashes was nearly complete still. Daisy continued to move in the direction of the distant oak, trusting some deeper connection to lead her to Emma. When her other senses failed, ahead through a brief break in the rain, Daisy spotted the massive oak tree, its branches thrashing in the wind, the half-finished fort barely visible as a darker shape among the foliage. The sight renewed the puppy's determination, and she increased her pace, ignoring the mud that splashed up around her legs, the cold water that ran into her eyes, the exhaustion already building in her young muscles. "Daisy? Daisy, is that you?" Emma's voice carried faintly through a momentary lull in the wind. The sound of her girl's voice sent a surge of energy through Daisy's tired body. She barked. In response, a high-pitched, urgent sound that carried despite the storm's roar. She could see Emma now peering down from the fort, her small face pale in a flash of lightning, her expression transforming from fear to disbelief as she spotted her. Puppy approaching through the storm. "Daisy, go back!" Emma shouted, her words partially lost in the wind. "It's too dangerous, go home." But Daisy had no intention of going home without Emma. The puppy reached the base of the great oak, looking up at the swaying fort trying to understand how to reach her girl. The ladder that normally leaned against the trunk was gone, torn away by the wind. Daisy circled the tree, barking frantically, her frustration growing as she realized she couldn't climb. To Emma, above in the fort, Emma's initial relief at seeing Daisy quickly turned to fresh fear. "Daisy, you have to go back," she called down. "Get Mom and Dad!" Daisy continued circling the tree, her barks taking on a desperate quality, as if trying to communicate that she had already tried to wake the family, that no help was coming from that direction. Emma's commands to leave only increasing her determination to stay. The storm's intensity seemed to increase with each passing minute. The wind, now strong enough to tear leaves and small branches from the oak tree, Emma ducked as debris rained down around her, the fort's floor shifting beneath her as the structure began to pull away from its moorings. In the tree, the fort's breaking. Emma cried out, her voice cracking with fear. Below, Daisy sensed the increasing danger, her instincts screaming that both she and Emma needed to find safer ground. The puppy's attention was drawn to movement at the edge of her vision. The nearby creek, normally a gentle flow between grassy banks, had become a churning torrent, steadily rising and encroaching on the land. Around the oak, lightning illuminated the scene fully for a brief moment, revealing the true danger. Emma's tree fort stood on what was rapidly becoming an island as the creek overflowed its banks, water already beginning to pool around the oak's massive roots within hours. Perhaps less, the entire area would be flooded. Daisy whined anxiously, pacing back and forth at the base of the tree, the cold water now reaching her belly in the lowest spots. Her golden fur plastered against her small frame, her brown eyes never leaving Emma's position above. The fort gave another ominous creak as a powerful gust tore at its structure. Emma screamed, grabbing onto the railing as the floor tilted beneath her. "Daisy!" she cried out. "Help!" the puppy responded with frantic barking, watching helplessly as the fort continued to pull away from the tree as if the storm was determined to tear it free. With Emma still inside, the distance between them only increased Daisy's desperation, her barks becoming howls that rose above even the storm's fury. In the fort, Emma made a decision. She couldn't stay in the increasingly unstable structure, but she couldn't climb down either without the ladder. The drop was too far for her 7-year-old legs. Her only option was to try reaching the main trunk of the oak, where large branches might provide a safer perch until help arrived. "I'm going to try." "To reach the tree trunk, Daisy," Emma called down, though she wasn't sure the puppy could understand her plan. "Stay there, girl." With trembling hands, Emma began to edge along the fort's tilting floor toward the point where it connected to the oak's massive trunk, each step challenging as the wind threatened to tear her small body away. Each movement accompanied by alarming creaks from the failing structure, rain and tears both streaming down her face as she fought to maintain her balance. Watching from below, Daisy seemed to understand Emma's intentions, the puppy positioning herself beneath the spot where Emma was trying to reach, as if preparing to catch her should she fall. Though her small body could hardly break the girl's fall, a particularly violent gust hit the fort, tearing away a section of railing. Emma screamed as she lost her balance, momentarily falling to her knees on the wet wooden floor. "I can't do it." She sobbed the distance to the trunk, suddenly seeming impossible to cross. Daisy's barking intensified, urging Emma to continue. The puppy's focus absolute despite the chaos around them, gathering her courage. Emma began moving again, inch by terrifying inch across the tilting floor, until finally, mercifully, her hands grasped the rough bark of the oak trunk. She pulled herself against it, hugging it tightly as the fort groaned and shifted behind her. Sooner had Emma reached this relative safety than a thunderous crack split the air, the weakened fort finally tearing free. From its moorings, Emma watched in horror as the structure her father had spent weekends building collapsed, crashing to the ground in a tangle of broken wood and torn canvas. Daisy barely avoided the falling debris, leaping aside as the fort smashed into the ground, the impact sending muddy water splashing in all directions. When the puppy looked up, Emma was still clinging to the trunk of the oak tree, safer than before, but still stranded high above the increasingly flooded ground. Emma looked down at her puppy through the rain, her voice shaking. "Good girl, Daisy, good girl," she managed. "Stay with me. Please don't leave." The golden retriever responded with a bark that seemed almost like a promise, her eyes never leaving her girl, as though. Storm continued to rage around them, two small creatures united against the fury of nature, one above and one below, both equally determined to survive until morning. The first hint of dawn brought little relief as gray light seeped reluctantly through the storm clouds. The rain had eased slightly, but the wind remained fierce, and the temperature had dropped further. Overnight, Emma still clung to the oak tree, her small body trembling with cold and exhaustion. Her arms ached from maintaining her grip, her once bright raincoat now torn and mud-splattered. Her blonde hair plastered against her pale face. Below, Daisy remained vigilant despite her own exhaustion. The puppy had found a slightly elevated spot at the base of the tree where she could keep her body mostly above the rising water, her golden fur matted and dirty, her usually bright eyes heavy with fatigue, but still fixed on Emma, above her occasionally. She would bark encouragement as if reminding the girl she wasn't alone. "Good morning, Daisy," Emma called down, her voice hoarse from crying and shouting against the storm. "You stayed? You really stayed?" The puppy's tail gave a weak wag at the sound of Emma's voice. "Mom and Dad will be looking for us soon." Emma continued, needing to believe her own words. They always get up at sunrise to check on the animals, as if in confirmation of Emma's hopes. The storm seemed to ease slightly, a brief break, in the clouds allowing watery sunlight to illuminate the scene more clearly, revealing the full extent of the night's destruction. The collapsed remains of the fort, now partially submerged in muddy water debris, scattered across what had been open pasture, and most alarmingly, the creek had become a rushing river, cutting Emma and Daisy off from the direct path back to the farmhouse back at the Anderson home. Sarah was the first to wake, stretching as she glanced at the clock, 5:47 a.m., later than usual, but the storm had kept them both awake intermittently through the night. She slipped from bed, careful not to disturb Mark, who had been up repeatedly checking windows and doors against the storm's assaults. Zara's morning routine began as always. First, stop Emma's room to make sure her energetic daughter wasn't already up causing mischief. She pushed open the door, expecting to see Emma's tousled head on the pillow, perhaps with Daisy curled beside her, the sight of the empty, rumpled bed. "Stopped her cold, Emma?" Sarah called, moving quickly to check the attached bathroom, finding it empty as well. She noticed the window slightly ajar, rain spattering the interior windowsill. "Emma?" she called more urgently. Mark appeared in the doorway, roused by the panic in his wife's voice. "What's wrong?" "Emma's not in her bed." Sarah's voice rose as fear took hold. "And Daisy's gone too. The window's open, Mark." Mark crossed the room in two strides, examining the window. "She couldn't have..." he began, then stopped as realization dawned. "The tree fort she's been talking about it all week in the storm?" Sarah's face drained of color. "She wouldn't be that foolish." "She's 7, Mark said grimly, already pulling on jeans and boots. "And determined she's done dangerous things before. Remember the barn roof last summer?" Sarah was already moving down the hall, bursting into Liam's room without knocking. "Liam, wake up, Emma's missing." The boy sat up groggily. "What? Your sister?" Sarah's voice cracked. "She's not in her bed. Did she say anything to you yesterday about going to the tree fort?" Liam's face paled as sleep cleared from his mind. She might have mentioned wanting to see what it was like during a storm, but I didn't think she was serious. I thought she was just talking." "Get dressed," Mark ordered from the doorway. "We need to search the property now." Within minutes, the remaining Andersons had assembled in the kitchen, Mark already pulling on his heavy raincoat. "Sarah, you check the house and outbuildings. Liam, come with me. We'll head toward the creek and the fort." "The phones are dead," Sarah reported, trying to maintain calm. "And the cell signal is out, must be towers down." "Radio." Mark asked, grabbing flashlights from a drawer. "I'll try," Sarah promised. The emergency radio might reach the county station. Outside, the rain had diminished to a steady drizzle, but the damage from the night storm was immediately apparent. Fallen branches littered the yard. The barn door hung at an angle, torn partially from its hinges, and, most concerning, standing water covered much of the lower pasture. "The creek's flooded," Liam said, unnecessarily as they slogged through mud toward the pasture gate. "Dad, it's all underwater between here and the oak tree." Mark's face was grim as he surveyed the transformed landscape. If she made it to the fort, she could be stranded. Liam did. "You bring the binoculars?" Liam pulled them from his jacket pocket. "Here." Mark raised them to his eyes, scanning the distant tree line for the distinctive shape of the oak and the fort they had built in its branches. A gasp escaped him as he focused. "On the area the fort's gone?" he said, his voice hollow. "It's not in the tree anymore?" "Gone," Liam repeated, grabbing the binoculars to see for himself. "But that means—" "It doesn't mean anything yet," Mark cut him off, though fear was evident in his voice. "It could have blown down empty. She might have never made it that far, or she could have come back." Liam continued to scan the area. "Dad, I see something moving by the tree. It's small. Maybe Daisy." Mark took the binoculars back, adjusting the focus. It's Daisy, which means Emma must be nearby." Hope and fresh fear warred in Mark's expression as he lowered the binoculars. "She's alive, Liam, but we can't get to her the normal way. The creeks completely flooded the crossing. We could try going around," Liam suggested, "through the north pasture and over the ridge." Mark nodded. "It'll take longer, but it might be our only option without a boat." He pulled out a handheld radio. "Sarah, do you copy?" The radio crackled. "I'm here. Any sign?" "Daisy's at the oak tree, which means Emma's likely there, too, but the creek's flooded. We can't cross directly. We're going to try the ridge route. I'll keep trying emergency services." Sarah's voice was steady, though strained. "The fire department has rescue boats." "Tell them to hurry," Mark replied. "And Sarah." He hesitated. "The tree fort is gone." The silence that followed conveyed Sarah's understanding of what that might mean. "Find her, Mark," she said finally. "Just find her." As Mark and Liam began the longer route around the property, Daisy continued, her vigil at the base of the oak tree, occasionally barking to maintain contact with Emma, and perhaps now to signal to the distant figures she had spotted on the far side of the flooded creek. "Daisy, do you see something?" Emma called down, her voice weak from exposure. "Is someone there?" The puppy barked more insistently, her tail beginning to wag with more energy as she recognized the scents of Mark and Liam, even at a distance. "Daddy?" Emma called, though her voice couldn't possibly carry across the expanse of floodwater. "Daddy, I'm here." In the tree, Emma shifted position, trying to see beyond the curtain of leaves that partially obscured her view, hope giving her renewed strength despite her exhaustion and the increasing numbness in her fingers and toes from the cold. "They're coming, Daisy," she called down to the puppy. "They're finally coming." But even as Emma's hopes rose, the oak tree creaked ominously beneath her, the sound of wood under stress audible even above the rushing water, and lingering wind, the storm-saturated ground around the massive tree's roots beginning to shift as the floodwaters continued to rise. Sarah paced the kitchen floor, the emergency radio crackling with intermittent updates from the County Emergency Management Agency, their voices clinical and detached as they reported widespread flooding, road closures, and power outages across the region. "This is Sarah Anderson at the Anderson Farm off County Road 16. She repeated into the radio for the third time. "We have a 7-year-old child missing, possibly stranded near the flooded creek on our property. We need emergency assistance." The response, when it finally came, offered little immediate hope. "Copy that, Mrs. Anderson. We have your location, but all emergency services are currently deployed for life-threatening situations. We'll dispatch a team as soon as one becomes available." Our daughter's life is threatened," Sarah snapped back, frustration breaking through her forced calm. "She's been out all night in the storm." "Understood, ma'am," the dispatcher replied. "But we currently have multiple water rescues in progress, including an assisted living facility downtown with 30 elderly residents. We'll get to you as soon as possible. Please stand by." Sarah set the radio down with shaking hands, turning to stare out the kitchen window at the transformed landscape, their familiar farm now bisected by what looked like a flowing river. Where the creek had once been, she could just make out the distant oak tree, but not the small figures of her husband and son making their way around the property, nor any sign of Emma or Daisy. Weather report on the emergency radio offered no comfort. The worst of the storm had passed overnight, but a second system was approaching, expected to bring additional heavy rainfall by early afternoon. Sarah checked her watch, 7:15 a.m. How long had Emma been out there exposed to the elements? The thought sent a fresh wave of fear through her. The radio crackled again. "Anderson Farm, this is Fire Captain Reynolds. We've received your request for assistance and have a rescue boat available. But road closures are preventing direct access to your location. Can you confirm if County Road 16 is passable?" Sarah grabbed the radio. "Parts are underwater. You'd need to come through the Wilson property on the north side. They have a higher access road." "Copy that. We'll attempt that route, Ita." "Approximately 45 minutes to your location." Sarah fought back tears of relief. "Thank you, please hurry. My husband and son are attempting to reach our daughter, but the flooding is severe." Meanwhile, Mark and Liam had been forced to abandon their original plan, the rising waters having cut off even the ridge route around the property. They now stood at the edge of the Wilson farm, watching the swollen creek rage between them and their destination. "We need to go back for the tractor," Mark said, his expression grim. "It's the only way we might ford this water." Liam stared across the expanse of muddy water. "But that'll take another hour at least." "We don't have a choice," Mark replied, already turning. "Back on foot, we'd be swept away, and Emma needs us alive." As they retraced their steps, Mark pulled out his radio. "Sarah, do you copy?" "I'm here." Her voice came through the static. "Emergency services are on their way, ETA, 45 minutes, but they have to come through the Wilson property." "Good. We're heading back for the tractor. The water's too high for us to cross safely on foot." Mark paused, then added, "Tell them to bring hypothermia treatment. Emma's been out all night at the oak tree." Emma's situation was deteriorating rapidly. The ground around the massive tree continued to erode as floodwaters rose the once solid oak. Now swaying slightly with each strong gust of wind, her perch among the branches becoming increasingly precarious below. Daisy whined anxiously as water reached her chest, forcing the puppy to scramble higher onto exposed roots, her eyes never leaving Emma even as she fought to maintain her own position. "It's okay, girl," Emma called down, her voice trembling with cold. "Help is coming, we just need to hold on." But even as she spoke, Emma could feel the tree shift beneath her, the sound of roots tearing from the saturated soil, audible even above the rushing water. The massive oak that had stood for generations was losing its battle with the flood. Daisy barked urgently, as if warning Emma of the danger, the puppy's instincts telling her they needed to move to safer ground. But there was nowhere for Emma to go. The water now surrounded the tree in all directions, a fast-moving current carrying branches and debris. Emma looked across the expanse of water toward home, her vision blurring with tears of exhaustion and fear. She could no longer see any sign of her father or brother, just the endless brown water. Where familiar pastures had been, the tree shifted again, more dramatically this time. Emma screamed as she nearly lost her grip on the branch, scrambling to secure herself as the oak tilted a few more degrees toward the water. "Daisy!" she cried out. In panic, "Daisy, help!" The puppy responded with frantic barking, swimming now as the water covered the last of her perch on the roots, her golden head barely visible above the muddy surface. Emma watched in horror as Daisy was swept away from the owl tree, the current catching her small body and pulling her downstream. "Daisy, no!" she screamed, reaching helplessly toward the water, but the puppy was not giving up with determination that defied her size. Daisy fought against the current, her legs paddling frantically, her eyes still fixed on Emma, even as the water carried her away. Emma's amazement, Daisy managed to catch herself against a partially submerged fence post about 20 feet downstream from the oak, the puppy clinging to this temporary sanctuary. Her barks now taking on a different tone, almost as if she were calling Emma to follow. The oak shifted again, this time with a terrible groaning sound. As more roots tore free, Emma realized with sudden clarity that the tree was going to fall, taking her with it into the raging water. She needed to make a decision, and quickly scanning the floodplain, Emma spotted what Daisy had already found: a line of fence posts still partially above water, creating a potential path toward slightly higher ground. It would mean entering the water, abandoning the relative safety of the tree for the unknown dangers of the flood. But staying meant certain disaster when the oak finally fell. "I'm coming, Daisy," Emma called her decision made. "Hold on, girl!" With trembling hands, Emma began to remove her waterlogged coat and shoes, knowing they would only weigh her down in the water. The cold air bit at her wet skin, but she forced herself to continue her movements, deliberate despite her shivering, tying her shoes around her neck by the laces. Emma took a deep breath, staring at the churning water below, then focusing on Daisy's golden head, still visible by the fence post. "Please let me make it," she whispered, before carefully beginning her descent from the tree. Each movement was agony, her stiff, cold limbs protesting as she climbed down toward the water, using branches as a ladder. The oak continuing to shift beneath her. The lowest branch still hung about 4 feet above the waters. Surface too high for a safe drop, too low for a return to safety. Daisy. "Watch me," Emma called, gathering her courage as she reached the final branch. "I'm going to swim to you." The puppy barked in response, her eyes locked on Emma's position. Emma took one final deep breath, then slipped from the branch into the cold water. The shock of it stealing her breath as she plunged beneath the surface for a terrifying moment before her natural buoyancy brought her back up, gasping and sputtering. The current immediately began pulling her not toward Daisy, but parallel to the fence line, away from her goal. "Daisy!" Emma cried out as she fought to orient herself in the powerful current, her small arms stroking desperately against the flow, trying to angle herself toward the fence post where her puppy waited. Daisy barked frantically, as if encouraging Emma to keep fighting, as if her voice could somehow guide her girl through the chaotic water. Emma fixed her eyes on the golden head, using it as a beacon. As she struggled against the current, her strength already waning, her limbs growing heavier with each stroke. "I can't make it," Emma gasped as the water pulled her farther from her goal, her head occasionally dipping below the surface as exhaustion took its toll. "Daisy, I can't." Daisy watched in growing distress as Emma struggled against the current, the puppy's instincts screaming that her girl was in danger. Without hesitation, Daisy released her grip on the fence post, plunging back into the floodwater, her small body immediately caught by the current. But rather than fighting against it, Daisy allowed the water to carry her, calculating her trajectory to intercept Emma's path. Emma barely noticed the golden form cutting through the water toward her. Her focus narrowed to the simple act of keeping her head above the surface, each breath a victory against the cold and exhaustion that threatened to pull her under. Then, suddenly, impossibly, she felt something brush against her arm, something warm and alive. "Daisy?" Emma gasped as the puppy swam alongside her golden head, bobbing in the churning water. The puppy nudged Emma insistently, pushing her toward a partially submerged log that had become wedged against another section of fence, creating a temporary island. In the flood, with her last reserves of strength, Emma grabbed onto the rough bark, pulling herself partially out of the water as Daisy scrambled up beside her, both of them trembling with exhaustion. "Good girl," Emma whispered, wrapping one arm around the puppy's wet fur. "Smart, brave girl." The log shifted beneath them, threatening to break free of its temporary mooring. Emma looked around desperately for another safe point, their position still perilous, the water continuing to rise around them all. In the distance, she could see the farmhouse tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far across the expanse of floodwater. "We need to keep moving, Daisy," Emma said, her voice barely audible over the rushing water. "We can't stay here." The puppy seemed to understand, licking Emma's cold cheek once before turning to look downstream, where the fence line continued, creating a potential path of partially submerged posts and debris, a dangerous route, but their only option, as the oak tree behind them finally surrendered to the flood with a thunderous crack, toppling into the water, sending waves rippling outward. "Okay?" Emma nodded, drawing strength from Daisy's determination. "We'll try." With trembling limbs, Emma slid back into the water, keeping one hand firmly on the log as she assessed the distance to the next potential foothold. A fence post about 6 feet away, the current between them swift but perhaps manageable. Daisy watched intently, as if waiting for instruction. "You first, Emma." Encouraged, "Show me how." Daisy didn't hesitate, slipping into the water and swimming purposefully toward the fence post, her small body working with the current rather than against it, reaching the post and scrambling up to balance precariously on top. She turned back to Emma, barking encouragement. Drawing a deep breath, Emma pushed off from the log, the current immediately grabbing her. But this time she was prepared, angling her body to use the flow rather than fight it directly, her arms stroking toward the fence post where Daisy waited. By some miracle she reached it, her hands closing around the rough wood as she pulled herself up next to the puppy. "We did it," she gasped in disbelief. "We really did it." Thus began a harrowing journey, Emma and Daisy, moving from one precarious foothold to the next, sometimes swimming, sometimes wading where the water was shallow enough. The puppy always leading the way, her instincts seeming to find the safest path through the floodplain, Emma following. With faltering steps, her body temperature dropping dangerously, her movements becoming increasingly clumsy. Meanwhile, Mark had returned to the farmhouse with Liam to find Sarah coordinating with emergency services via radio. "The rescue boat is on its way," she reported, her face pale with worry. "But the second storm system is moving in faster than predicted. We may only have an hour before it hits." Mark nodded grimly, already moving toward the barn where their old tractor was stored. "I'm taking the tractor. It sits high enough to ford some of this water." "I'm coming with you," Liam insisted, following his father. And no, Mark's tone brooked no argument. "You stay with your mother. Someone needs to guide the rescue team when they arrive. Show them exactly where to go." Reluctantly, Liam nodded, understanding the logic, though his expression revealed how difficult it was to stay behind. Sarah handed Mark a backpack. "Emergency supplies, blankets, first aid kit, flares." Her voice steady despite her fear. "Mark, find her." "I will," he promised, pulling his wife into a brief, fierce embrace before heading out to the barn. The tractor roared to life, its massive tires and elevated cab giving Mark a significant advantage over the floodwaters that had thwarted their earlier attempts. He navigated carefully across the farmyard, the water already reaching halfway up the big tires, in some places the engine straining as he guided the machine toward where they had last seen Daisy by the oak tree from. Her vantage point in the kitchen window, Sarah watched her husband's progress, the tractor moving with agonizing slowness through the floodwaters beside her. Liam monitored the emergency radio. Severe thunderstorm warning remains in effect. The emotionless voice reported second system expected to bring an additional 3 to 5 inches of rainfall. Potential for flash flooding continues. Residents in low-lying areas should seek higher ground immediately. Mom, Liam's voice cracked with emotion. "What if Dad can't find her before the next storm hits?" Sarah pulled her son close. "Your father will find her." "Liam, he has to The sound of an engine approaching drew their attention to the driveway where a rescue boat on a trailer had arrived. Firefighters in yellow slickers already unloading their equipment. Sarah and Liam rushed outside to meet them. "Anderson family?" A firefighter approached, clipboard in hand. "I'm Captain Reynolds. We got your call about your missing daughter." "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "My husband has taken our tractor to try to reach her. She was last seen near the oak tree by the creek, but that whole area is flooded now." Reynolds consulted a satellite map of the property. "We'll launch from the closest access point and sweep the flood zone. Your husband should return to high ground immediately. We're tracking another severe cell moving this way." "He won't come back without Emma," Sarah said simply. Reynolds nodded, understanding. "Then we'll find them both." "Ma'am, can you describe your daughter? What was she wearing?" As Sarah provided details, Liam scanned the flooded pasture, his eyes widening as he spotted something unusual. "Mom, look!" He pointed toward a cluster of debris about halfway between the Sioux oak tree and the house. "Something's moving out there." Reynolds raised binoculars to his eyes, focusing on the area. "I see two figures, one very small, one child-sized, moving along the fence line. They're making progress toward the house." "Emma," Sarah gasped, "and Daisy, that has to be them." "They're still in a dangerous position," Reynolds cautioned, already signaling his team to accelerate their launch. "The water's moving fast through that section, and the next storm cell is approaching. Rapidly." Liam stared in disbelief. "She's trying to walk home through the flood, smart girl." Reynolds commented, "She's using the fence line as a guide, staying on the high points. But they need assistance immediately. That water's still rising." As the rescue team rushed to deploy their boat, Mark had also spotted the movement along the fence line, changing the tractor's direction to intercept Emma's path. The massive vehicle pushing through deepening water, its engine roaring with effort. Emma, meanwhile, had reached another temporary haven, a section of fence that remained partially above water. Daisy pressed against her side, both of them visibly exhausted. Emma's lips had taken on a bluish tinge, her movement sluggish as hypothermia set in. The only thing keeping her moving was Daisy's constant encouragement, the puppy nudging her forward, barking whenever Emma seemed about to give up in the western sky. Dark clouds were building again, the brief respite from the storm coming to an end. As the second system approached, wind picking up, carrying the scent of fresh rain. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by the low rumble of thunder. Emma looked up at the threatening sky, her face crumpling with despair. "Not again," she whispered. "Please, not again." Daisy pressed closer to Emma's side, offering what little warmth her wet fur could provide, her brown eyes fixed on the girl's face as if willing her to continue. Then, above the sound of wind and water, came a new noise, the distinctive rumble of the farm tractor's engine. Emma raised her head in disbelief as the big green machine appeared through the curtain of mist that hung over the floodwaters, her father visible in the cab. "Daddy!" Emma screamed, with what little strength remained in her voice. "Daddy, we're here!" Daisy added, her voice barking frantically to attract attention, her tail beginning to wag as she recognized Mark's scent. Even across the water, Mark spotted them, immediately turning the tractor toward their position, his face a mixture of relief and urgent concern as he assessed the dangerous water still separating them. Behind him, the rescue boat had launched from the farmhouse shore, its powerful motor driving it quickly toward their position. It was a race now against both the rising water and the approaching storm, each minute critical as Emma's condition deteriorated. Mark pushed the tractor to its limits, the massive machine struggling through water that now reached halfway up its wheels. Each yard gained a victory against the flood that threatened to stall the engine, the distance between him and Emma closing. Agonizingly slowly through the windshield, he could see his daughter's condition more clearly now. Her small form hunched against the cold Daisy, pressed protectively against her side. "Hold on, Emma," he shouted, though he knew she couldn't hear him. Over the combined noise of the tractor engine, water, and wind. "I'm coming, Princess, just hold on." The fence section where Emma and Daisy had taken refuge was showing signs of stress posts, wobbling in the saturated ground, threatening to give way. Under the constant pressure of the floodwaters, Emma seemed to sense the danger clinging to the highest part, her legs dangling in the rushing current. As she struggled to maintain her position, Daisy remained vigilantly at Emma's side. The puppy, somehow understanding that their sanctuary was failing, barking with increased urgency as she sensed Mark's approach. The golden retriever's eyes moving constantly between Emma and the approaching tractor behind Mark, the rescue boat was gaining ground, its powerful motor better suited to navigating the floodwaters than the tractor's wheels. Captain Reynolds at the helm with another firefighter positioned at the bow. Ready for immediate rescue operations, they carried thermal blankets and emergency medical equipment, knowing that Emma's exposure to the elements overnight would require immediate treatment. The first fat raindrops of the new storm system began to fall spattering against the tractor's cab and creating ripples across. The floodwaters, the western sky had darkened completely, now promising another deluge within minutes. Emma looked up at the threatening clouds, her expression one of defeat. As if this final challenge might break her remaining resolve, Mark was close. Enough now to see the blue tinge of his daughter's lips, the violent shivering that racked her small frame, signs of dangerous hypothermia that sent fresh fear through him. He pushed the throttle forward, urging more power from the straining engine. "Just a little more," he muttered. "Come on, old girl, just a little more." The tractor lurched forward, then suddenly stopped its engine, coughing as water reached the air. Intake, the massive wheels spinning without traction in the deepening flood. Mark slammed, his hand against the steering wheel in frustration. Just 30 yards separated him from Emma, but it might as well have been miles with the tractor immobilized. "Hold position," Reynolds called from the rescue boat now approaching from behind. "We'll reach her." Mark nodded grimly, reaching for the emergency pack Sarah had prepared and slinging it over his shoulder. If the tractor couldn't go further, he would swim the remaining distance. Captain Reynolds motioned for him to wait. But Mark's focus had narrowed to a single goal, reaching his daughter. Nothing else mattered as Mark prepared to abandon the tractor. A new sound rose above the storm, the creaking groan of wood under stress. The fence section where Emma clung was finally giving way, posts tilting as the saturated ground released its hold. Emma screamed, clutching desperately at the failing structure. Daisy barking frantically beside her. "Emma!" Mark shouted, abandoning caution as he plunged from the tractor into chest-deep water. The current immediately threatening to sweep him away, only his height and strength allowing him to maintain his footing as he fought toward his daughter. The rescue boat accelerated, Reynolds recognizing the critical nature of the situation as the fence continued to collapse. Emma and Daisy's sanctuary disappearing beneath the churning water. The firefighter at the bow, ready to throw rope, prepared to cast at the moment they were within range. Emma lost her grip as the fence post she was holding tore free of the ground, her small body immediately caught by the current. Daisy didn't hesitate, the puppy launching herself into the water, after Emma staying close as both were swept downstream away from the approaching rescuers. "No!" Mark shouted, changing direction to follow their path, his progress agonizingly slow against the powerful current. Each step a battle for balance in the treacherous underwater terrain. Reynolds swung the rescue boat in a tight arc, tracking Emma and Daisy's movement. "Position to intercept," he ordered. His team, the boat's motor roaring as they calculated the flow rate and trajectory. Emma struggled to keep her head above water. Her strength nearly exhausted the cold, having sapped her remaining reserves. Daisy swam strongly beside her, occasionally nudging Emma's arm as if encouraging her to keep fighting occasionally, barking to help the rescuers track their position. In the churning water ahead of them loomed a new danger. A fallen tree created a strainer. In the floodwaters, branches catching debris while allowing water to flow through, creating a deadly trap for anything caught in its grasp. Emma was being carried directly toward it. Too exhausted to alter her course, Daisy seemed to recognize the threat, the puppy swimming more frantically now, attempting to push Emma away from the direct path of the strainer, her small body working against both the current and Emma's weight. "She's heading for the downed tree," Reynolds shouted to his team. "We need to reach her before she hits it." Mark heard the warning redoubling his efforts as he slogged through the flood, his eyes fixed on the small figures in the water, his daughter and the brave puppy, who had somehow found her in the night and stayed with her through the ordeal. The rescue boat closed the distance, the firefighter at the bow preparing to cast the throw rope. As they came within range, Emma, barely conscious now, was drifting directly toward the strainer, Daisy still attempting to alter their course, the puppy's strength flagging after hours of fighting the elements in a final, desperate act of protection. Daisy managed to position herself between Emma and the fallen tree, taking the brunt of the impact as they struck the branches. Emma's body, partially protected by the puppy's, her small form caught in the outer branches rather than pulled beneath them into the deadly underwater portion of the strainer. "I've got visual." The firefighter at the bow called. "They've hit the tree, but they're still above water." Reynolds maneuvered the boat carefully alongside the fallen tree, aware that approaching too quickly could push Emma and Daisy deeper into the hazard. Ready with the pole hook and throw line, Emma clung weakly to the branches, Daisy somehow maintaining position beside her, though the puppy was clearly injured from the impact. Her breathing labored, her movements no longer coordinated, the cold water and exhaustion taking their toll on her small body. "Emma," Mark called, having finally reached the edge of the fallen tree. "Emma, hold on, princess." Emma's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her father's voice. "Daddy," she whispered. "Daddy, Daisy found me. Daisy stayed with me." "I know, princess," Mark fought to keep his voice steady as he carefully navigated the outer branches of the fallen tree, reaching toward his daughter. "I'm here now. You're going to be okay." The rescue boat reached position, the firefighter extending the pole hook toward Emma. "Sir, we need to get her into the boat immediately. She's showing severe signs of hypothermia." Mark nodded, understanding the urgency, working with the rescue team to carefully extract Emma from the branches, her limbs too numb to help with the process. Her eyes continually drifting closed, then opening with effort to check on Daisy, the puppy too. Emma managed as the firefighter lifted her toward the boat. "Please save Daisy. We'll get you both," Reynolds promised, already positioning the boat for the second rescue. Mark reached for Daisy, the golden retriever still tangled in the branches, her normally bright eyes dull with exhaustion and pain. But as he approached, the puppy gave a weak wag of her tail, recognition in her gaze. "Come on, girl." Mark encouraged, gently working to free Daisy from the branches. "Your job is done. You found her. You protected her. Now let us help you." Daisy whimpered softly as Mark finally extracted her from the tree, cradling the puppy against his chest as Reynolds helped them both into the rescue boat, where Emma was already wrapped in thermal blankets, oxygen mask over her face, but her eyes open, watching anxiously for Daisy. "She's here," Mark assured Emma, placing the wet puppy gently beside her. "Daisy's right." "Here." Emma's hand emerged from the blankets, seeking contact with the puppy's fur, Daisy responding with a weak lick to her fingers as Reynolds powered the boat toward shore, the first heavy raindrops of the second storm system now falling steadily. Around them, "She knew, Dad," Emma whispered beneath the oxygen mask. "She knew I was gone when everyone was sleeping. Daisy knew, and she found me." The rescue boat fought against the strengthening current as Reynolds navigated toward the farmhouse. The second storm system now fully upon them, rain falling in sheets, visibility reduced to mere yards ahead. Emma lay bundled in thermal blankets, her body temperature dangerously low despite the emergency warming measures. Her breathing shallow but steady. Mark sat beside her, one hand on Emma's blanket, wrapped form, the other gently stroking Daisy, who lay exhausted but watchful at Emma's side. "How much longer?" Mark shouted over the storm's renewed fury. 5 minutes, Reynolds called back. "We've contacted emergency medical services. They'll meet us at your property." Mark nodded, turning his attention back to Emma, her pale face barely visible beneath the oxygen mask, her blue eyes occasionally fluttering open to check that Daisy was still beside her. Each time the puppy responded with a weak thump of her tail, as if reassuring Emma that she remained on duty. "Stay with me, princess," Mark whispered, We're almost home. The boat rounded a bend, bringing the farmhouse into view, lights blazing from every window. Sarah and Liam visible on the porch alongside emergency medical technicians already prepared with a stretcher and additional medical equipment. Reynolds guided the boat toward the makeshift dock they had established at the edge of the flooded yard. "Emma!" Sarah cried out, rushing toward the water's edge as the boat approached her face, a mixture of relief, terror, and desperate. "Hope, she's alive," Reynolds called back, hypothermic and exhausted, but alive. The rescue boat bumped gently against the dock, the team immediately securing it as the medics moved forward to transfer Emma from the boat to the stretcher, their movements efficient and practiced, years of training evident in their coordinated efforts, pupils responsive. One medic reported lifting Emma's eyelids to check with a pen light, core temperature approximately 93 degrees. "We need to warm her gradually." Sarah reached for Emma's hand. "Baby, I'm here. Mama's here, you're safe now." Emma's eyes opened briefly, recognition flickering across her features. "Mom," she whispered. "Daisy saved me." "I know, honey." Sarah choked back tears. "We'll take care of both of you." The medics lifted the stretcher mark, following with Daisy in his arms, the puppy refusing to be separated from Emma. Despite her own injuries and exhaustion, her brown eyes fixed on the stretcher, as if still maintaining her vigil. "The puppy needs medical attention too," Mark told the veterinary technician who had arrived with the emergency team. "She's been in the floodwaters as long as Emma, maybe longer," the vet tech nodded. "We'll take care of her, sir, but we need to transport your daughter to the hospital immediately." "Daisy comes with us." Emma's voice rose surprisingly strong from beneath the blankets. "Please, she has to stay with me." The medics exchanged glances, then looked to the veterinary technician. "Can we stabilize the dog for transport?" The girl needs to remain calm, and the psychological benefit may outweigh protocol concerns. The vet tech quickly examined Daisy, still cradled in Mark's arms. "She's hypothermic and exhausted, possibly some minor injuries, but stable enough. For transport, I can continue treatment in the ambulance." Then it settled. The lead medic decided, "The dog comes with us." They moved quickly toward the waiting ambulance, the storm intensifying around them, wind driving the rain horizontally across. The yard lightning illuminating the scene in stark white flashes. The second system proving as violent as predicted. Liam held an umbrella over the stretcher, a futile gesture against the storm's fury, but one that reflected the family's desperate need to protect Emma now that they had her back. "I'm riding with her," Sarah stated in a tone that brooked no argument, climbing into the ambulance behind the stretcher mark. Handed Daisy to the veterinary technician who had prepared a warming blanket. "For the puppy, take care of them both," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We'll follow in the truck." Inside the ambulance, the medics worked efficiently, connecting Emma to monitors, starting a warming IV, placing heat packs strategically while being careful not to rewarm her too quickly, which could cause dangerous complications. The veterinary technician settled beside them. Daisy wrapped in specialized warming blankets, her own vital signs being carefully monitored. Puppy's temperature is 95 degrees, the tech reported, better than the child's but still concerning. Emma's hand emerged from her blankets, seeking Daisy, the puppy responding immediately by stretching her neck toward the girl's fingers, making contact despite her exhaustion. "They need each other," Sarah observed, watching the interaction. "They've been through this together," the lead medic nodded, understanding. "Keeping them together is therapeutic for both. We'll make it work," as the ambulance pulled away from the Anderson. Farm lights flashing, but siren silent in the rural setting, Mark and Liam watched from the porch, both soaked to the skin from the renewed downpour. "She's really going to be okay?" Liam asked, his voice small and uncertain in a way that reminded Mark how young 12 still was despite the boy's usual bravado. "She's going to be fine," Mark assured him. Though the medical reality was more complex, hypothermia recovery, especially in children, could be complicated. "Emma's tougher than we." Realized, apparently. Liam nodded. "And Daisy? She really found Emma in the middle of the night?" "She must have," Mark confirmed. That puppy tracked Emma through the storm, stayed with her all night, and helped keep her alive. I've never seen anything like it, especially from such a young dog. They moved toward Mark's truck, both silent, as they processed the events of the past 12 hours. The near loss of Emma, the extraordinary actions of a 4-month-old puppy, the narrowness of the rescue dad. Liam broke the silence as they drove toward the county hospital. I should have paid more attention when Emma talked about the fort. I should have told you she was serious about going out there. Mark glanced at his son, seeing the guilt etched on his young face. This isn't on you. Liam, Emma made a dangerous choice. We all missed the signs, but what matters is she's safe now. Because of Daisy, Liam said, not because of us. Mark couldn't argue with that truth. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places, he said finally, and sometimes we need to be humble enough to recognize that. At the county hospital, Emma had been transferred to the pediatric emergency department, a team of doctors and nurses now attending to her, carefully monitoring her core temperature as it slowly rose, cardiac monitors beeping steadily, reassuring in their regularity. Sarah remained at her side while the veterinary technician continued to care for Daisy in the same treatment room hospital protocol bent by compassionate staff who recognized the unique bond between child and puppy. Her temperature is up to 95 degrees, the doctor reported, checking the monitors. She's responding well to the warming measures? And Daisy? Emma asked, her voice stronger. Now, as her body slowly recovered, the vet tech smiled. She's doing great. Her temperature is almost normal, and she's taking water by mouth, all good signs. Emma nodded, satisfied, turning her attention back to her mother. I'm sorry, Mom. I know I shouldn't have gone to the fort. Sarah stroked Emma's hair, now dry and spread across the hospital pillow. We'll talk about that later. Right now, I'm just grateful to have you back. She hesitated, then added, Emma, how did Daisy find you? How did she know you? We're gone? Emma's face brightened with something like pride. She's special, Mom. She knew I was missing even when everyone was asleep. She came looking for me all by herself. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I think she can sense things other dogs can't. Before Sarah could respond, Mark and Liam arrived directed to Emma's treatment room by the nursing staff, their faces lighting with relief at the sight of Emma awake and improving. Princess. Mark moved quickly to the bedside. How are you feeling? Better. Emma managed a smile. They're taking good care of Daisy, too. Mark looked to where the puppy lay on a warming bed, her golden fur still damp, but her eyes brighter now, tracking everyone in the room, though always returning to Emma. She's quite a dog. The veterinary technician commented, her protective instincts are extraordinary, especially for a puppy so young. Typically, this kind of behavior doesn't develop until full maturity. There's nothing typical about Daisy, Emma stated with absolute certainty. She's special. As if in response to Emma's words, Daisy lifted her head, giving a soft whine that seemed to express agreement. The sound bringing smiles to the faces of everyone in the room, a moment of lightness amid the emotional aftermath of near tragedy outside the hospital windows. The storm continued to rage, the second system proving as destructive as predicted. But within the treatment room, a different atmosphere prevailed. One of gratitude, relief, and the quiet recognition of something remarkable, the courage and devotion of a small golden puppy who had refused to accept that her girl was missing. Emma remained in the hospital for 2 days, under careful observation as her body recovered from the hypothermia and exposure, Daisy never leaving her side, the hospital administration making an unprecedented exception to their no pets policy after hearing the remarkable story from both the rescue team and medical staff. Sarah stayed in Emma's room while Mark and Liam returned to the farm to assess the damage and care for the livestock. The morning of the third day, Dr. Chen completed her final examination of Emma. Your body temperature has been stable for 24 hours. All your vitals look good, and you're eating well. She smiled. I think you're ready to go home today. Emma beamed at the news. Did you hear that, Daisy? We're going home. The golden retriever, who had been sleeping on a special bed beside Emma's hospital bed, lifted her head at the sound of her name, her tail immediately beginning to wag as if she understood perfectly. Turchin knelt to examine Daisy as, "Well, and how's our hero doing today?" She checked the puppy's eyes and gently felt along her ribs, where she had sustained bruising during the rescue. Remarkable recovery, just like her girl. The veterinarian, who had been consulting on Daisy's care, nodded in agreement. She's young, which helped her bounce back quickly, but I've rarely seen such resilience in a puppy this age. Sarah gathered Emma's few belongings while the medical team completed the discharge paperwork. Your father should be here soon with clean clothes, then we can head home. Emma nodded, but her expression turned serious. Mom, when we get home, can we go see the oak tree? I want to show you and Dad exactly what happened. How Daisy found me. Sarah hesitated. Honey, the floodwaters are still receding. It might not be safe yet, please. Emma persisted. It's important. I need to show you what Daisy did. Before Sarah could respond, Mark arrived carrying a small duffel bag. How are my girls today? He asked, kissing Emma's forehead, then Sarah's cheek. Dr. Chen says we can go home, Emma announced, and I want to show you and Mom where Daisy found me. Mark exchanged glances with Sarah. The creek's back within its banks, but there's still a lot of debris, Princess. It might be better to wait a few days, but Dad, it's important, Emma insisted. I need to show you how far Daisy came to find me, how she stayed with me all night. Something in Emma's voice conveyed the deep significance this held for her. Mark nodded, slowly. All right, if Dr. Chen clears you for a brief stop on the way home, we can take a look. But we stay in the truck if the ground is too saturated, understood? Emma agreed readily, her face lighting up with relief, as if completing this pilgrimage was essential to processing her ordeal. An hour later, the Anderson family truck pulled carefully along the edge of what had been a floodplain but was now a muddy expanse of debris. Strewn farmland. Emma pressed her face to the window, Daisy beside her similarly focused on the landscape outside, both seeming to recognize landmarks despite the transformation wrought by the floodwaters. There, Emma pointed suddenly, that's the oak tree, or what's left of it. Mark slowed the truck following Emma's direction until they reached the massive fallen oak now lying on its side roots exposed to the sky, its enormous trunk creating a bridge across what had been the flood zone, its upper branches still partially submerged in the creek, which had receded, but remained swollen. Can we get closer? Emma asked, her voice hushed with something like reverence. Mark assessed the ground. It looks stable enough here, he decided, driving the truck carefully across the muddy ground until they were within 20 yards of the fallen giant. This is as close as we can safely get. That's okay, Emma said, already unbuckling her seatbelt. I can see everything from here. The family exited the truck, Emma immediately taking Daisy's leash, the puppy walking close beside her as they approached the fallen oak mark, and Sarah following a few steps behind, giving Emma the space she seemed to need. This is where I was, Emma explained, pointing to the upper branches of the tree now lying at an angle across the ground. When the tree was still standing, I climbed up here after the fort broke apart. Sarah gasped softly, imagining her daughter clinging to those same branches in the midst of the raging storm. And Daisy was down there, Emma continued, pointing to what had been the base of the tree. She couldn't climb up, but she stayed right there all night, barking to keep me awake, making sure I didn't fall asleep in the cold. Mark knelt beside the exposed root system, now understanding the full gravity of the situation. The whole tree was already starting to go. The roots were being undermined by the floodwaters. Emma nodded. It kept shifting all night. I was so scared. Her voice quieted, but Daisy never left. Even when the water got so high she had to swim, Daisy pressed against Emma's leg as if offering comfort. Even now, days after the danger had passed, her brown eyes watching Emma's face with unmistakable devotion. When the tree started to fall, I had to get down, Emma continued, walking along the massive trunk. The water was so cold it took my breath away, but Daisy swam right beside me, pushed me toward the fence posts. She pointed to the remnants of fencing still visible in the mud. We went from post to post all the way across. She always went first to show me the way. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as she followed Emma's narrative, picturing her small daughter and the equally small puppy making their perilous journey across the floodwaters. Emma, how did you know what to do? How did you keep going? Emma looked down at Daisy, her expression suddenly wise beyond her 7 years. I just followed Daisy. She always knew which way was safest, which posts would hold our weight when to swim and when to rest. She knelt, hugging the puppy close. It's like she could see things I couldn't. Mark stood silently absorbing the scene before him, the massive fallen oak, the debris-strewn landscape, and his daughter holding the golden puppy who had somehow guided her through. I've been around dogs my whole life, he said finally. Working dogs, herding dogs, hunting dogs, but I've never seen anything like what Daisy did, especially not from a puppy barely out of weaning. That's because she's special, Dad, Emma said, with absolute conviction. She knew I was gone when everyone was sleeping. She knew exactly where to find me, and she knew how to bring me home, as if understanding she was being discussed. Daisy looked up at Mark, her intelligent eyes meeting his, in a way that seemed almost human before returning her attention to Emma. I believe you, Mark said simply. They walked back to the truck in silence, each processing what they had seen and heard. Emma, maintaining physical contact with Daisy the entire time, her hand either on the puppy's leash or buried in her golden fur as they drove away. Emma looked back at the fallen oak one last time. I was really scared I wouldn't see you guys again, she admitted, her voice small. But Daisy kept telling me we'd make it home. Telling you? Sarah asked gently. Emma nodded. Not with words, but I could feel it when I wanted to give up. She'd bark or lick my face or push against me like she was saying, keep going, Emma, don't stop now. That's exactly what she was doing, Mark confirmed. Dogs communicate differently than humans, but they communicate just as clearly if we're paying attention. As they approached the farmhouse, Emma's expression brightened. Can Daisy sleep in my bed from now on? She's earned it, don't you think? Sarah laughed, the sound carrying a release of tension that had been held for days. Yes, Emma, I think Daisy has definitely earned that privilege. The puppy's tail thumped against the seat at these words, her gaze moving between family members as if following the conversation. And I think, Mark added, as they pulled into the driveway, that Daisy deserves something special for dinner tonight. What do you say to some grilled chicken instead of puppy kibble? Daisy's ears perked up at this, her tail wagging more vigorously. She understands every word, Emma declared with absolute certainty. She always has. Watching the puppy's alert expression, her intelligent eyes tracking their conversation, the rest of the Anderson family found it difficult to disagree. Life gradually returned to normal at the Anderson farm in the weeks following Emma's ordeal. The floodwaters receded completely, leaving behind mud, silt, and debris that required countless hours of cleanup. The damaged barn door was repaired, fences, rebuilt, pastures cleared of fallen branches and other hazards. The physical reminders of the storm slowly erased through hard work and determination. Emma's nightmares, however, proved more persistent than the physical damage. Almost every night, she would wake crying out, convinced she was still in the tree with the floodwaters rising around her. Each time, Daisy would immediately press close, licking her face, whining softly, until Emma's breathing steadied and reality returned. The puppy seemed to sense the approach of these nightmares, often waking and moving to Emma's side before the first cry even left the girl's lips. She knows when they're coming, Emma explained one morning at breakfast, dark circles under her eyes, testament to another disrupted night. She wakes me up before the scary part. Sarah and Mark exchanged concerned glances. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Chen about the nightmares, Sarah suggested gently. They don't seem to be getting better. Emma shook her head vehemently. I don't need a doctor, I have Daisy. She wrapped her arm around the puppy who sat faithfully beside her chair. She makes me feel safe. Mark studied his daughter, noting how she never moved more than a few feet from Daisy, how her hand constantly sought contact with the puppy's fur, how her eyes tracked the golden retriever whenever she moved around the room. The bond between them having deepened into something extraordinary since the rescue. "I have an idea," he said finally. "Why don't we drive out to the Wilsons' farm today? Their golden retriever just had puppies. They're from the same bloodline as Daisy. Might be interesting to see her relatives." Emma's face brightened at the suggestion. "Can we really? How many puppies are there?" 6. "I think," Mark smiled at her enthusiasm, "Bob Wilson says they're about 3 weeks old, just starting to open their eyes and explore." Sarah nodded appreciatively at Mark's strategy, knowing that positive experiences with other dogs might help Emma process her trauma. Sounds like a perfect afternoon outing. An hour later, the Anderson family truck pulled into the Wilsons' long driveway. Emma sitting between her parents, Daisy perched on her lap, despite having grown considerably in the weeks. Since the flood, the puppy still insisted on being treated like a lapdog whenever possible. Bob Wilson, a weather-beaten farmer in his 60s, greeted them at the door. "Come on in, folks, Mama, and the puppies are in the mudroom, nice and warm in there." They followed him through the comfortable farmhouse to a cozy room at the back, where a large golden retriever lay in a whelping box surrounded by 6 squirming puppies. Their eyes recently opened, their movements still clumsy but enthusiastic. "This is a Sunshine," Bob introduced the mother dog, who thumped her tail in greeting, "Daisy's second cousin. I believe they share a grandfather." Emma knelt beside the whelping box, Daisy sitting alertly at her side, studying the puppies with obvious interest. "They're so tiny," Emma marveled. "Was Daisy ever this small? Hard to believe, isn't it?" Sarah smiled, watching, as one particularly bold puppy wobbled toward the edge of the box, investigating the visitors. Daisy's behavior changed suddenly, her ears pricking forward, her posture becoming intensely focused as she watched the curious puppy. Her tail began to wag slowly, not in greeting, but in what appeared to be recognition. "Well, now that's interesting," Bob commented, noticing the change in Daisy's demeanor. "She seems quite taken with that little one." The puppy, a female with slightly darker golden fur than her siblings, continued her determined approach, eventually tumbling over the low edge of the whelping box. Daisy immediately moved forward, gently nosing the puppy back onto her feet. "She's helping it," Liam observed with surprise, "like she knows what to do." Emma watched the interaction, her expression thoughtful. "She remembers being that small. I think she's telling the puppy to be careful." The puppy seemed equally fascinated with Daisy, circling the older dog on unsteady legs, occasionally batting at her nose with tiny paws. Daisy's patience was remarkable as she allowed the exploration, her posture protective yet encouraging. "That little girl's the adventurous one of the litter," Bob explained. "Always the first to try something new, first to open her eyes, first to try walking stronger than her brothers too." Emma glanced up at her father. "She's like Daisy, isn't she? Special, Marky?" Nodded slowly, watching the unusual interaction between the young dog and the puppy. "Seems that way, Princess." The visit continued for nearly an hour, Emma eventually sitting on the floor with Daisy beside her, both watching the puppy's antics. The dark gold female repeatedly returning to investigate Daisy, as if drawn by some invisible connection. The mother dog Sunshine seemed content to allow this interaction, watching calmly from her position in the whelping box as they prepared to leave. Bob Wilson pulled Mark aside. "Strange thing," he said in a low voice. "That pup that took to your Daisy, she was born during the big storm night. Your girl went missing, came earlier than the others, stronger too, right from the start." Mark felt a curious shiver pass through him. "What time was she born? Do you remember?" Bob thought for a moment. Must have been around 2 in the morning. Worst part of the storm, Sunshine was restless all evening, then delivered 5 of them quick as you please. But that little dark gold one she held back nearly 2 hours, like she was waiting for something. 2 in the morning? Mark thought the approximate time Daisy had discovered Emma was missing. Left the house to search for her in the storm. Interesting. Timing, he said carefully. Bob nodded. Thought so too, especially considering. He hesitated. Well, considering what your Daisy did that night. Not normal behavior for a pup her age, bound to make a man wonder. Wonder what exactly? Mark prompted. Bob shrugged. My grandfather used to say some dogs see things we can't, that they're connected to something beyond our understanding, especially the golden ones with their old souls and knowing eyes. He looked slightly embarrassed. Just old farmer superstition, I suppose. Mark watched Emma saying goodbye to the puppies. Daisy still. Focused on the dark gold female, maybe not just superstition, he said quietly, on the drive home. Emma was unusually silent, staring out the window, her expression contemplative. Daisy curled on her lap, seemingly equally lost in thought. You okay, Princess? Mark asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. Emma nodded slowly. Dad, did you see how Daisy was with that one puppy? The dark gold one? I did, Mark confirmed. They seemed to have a special connection. It was born the night I was lost, Emma said with certainty, though no one had told her this information. The night Daisy found me. Sarah turned in her seat to look at her daughter. How do you know that, Emma? Emma stroked Daisy's fur, her expression serious, beyond her years. I just know. Mom, the way Daisy just knew I was missing. She fell silent for a moment, then added, that puppy is going to help someone too. Someday, just like Daisy helped me. Mark and Sarah exchanged glances, neither questioning Emma's conviction. There had been too many inexplicable elements to their experience to dismiss such certainty. That night, Emma slept peacefully for the first time since her ordeal. No nightmares disturbed her rest, though Daisy maintained her vigilant position beside the girl throughout the night, as if standing guard against the return of bad dreams. In the morning, Emma announced at breakfast, I want to write down everything that happened with Daisy and me during the storm, so we never forget, not one detail. That's a wonderful idea, Sarah encouraged. We could make a special book with pictures too. Emma nodded enthusiastically, and maybe when that dark gold puppy grows up and helps someone, we can add that story too, like a family history, but for special dogs. Mark smiled at his daughter's conviction. You really believe that Puppy is going to do something extraordinary? I know it, Dad, Emma said with absolute certainty. Daisy knows it too. She recognized something in that puppy, something like herself. Liam, who had been quietly eating his cereal, looked up, like how Daisy knew Emma was missing when nobody else did. Exactly, Emma confirmed. Some dogs just know things. Humans don't. They can sense things we can't see. As if in agreement, Daisy gave a soft woof. From her position beside Emma's chair, her intelligent eyes moving from face to face around the table, as if following the conversation perfectly. Well, Mark said thoughtfully, after what we've experienced, I'm inclined to believe anything is possible, especially when it comes to Daisy. The story of Daisy and Emma spread quickly through their small, rural community, first through the accounts of the rescue team, then through local newspaper coverage that featured a photograph of Emma in her hospital bed. Daisy curled protectively, or beside her, the headline reading, Puppy Hero Saves Child During Historic Flood. The County Veterinary Association, hearing of Daisy's extraordinary actions, decided to present her with their annual Heroism Award, typically reserved for service dogs. With years of training, the ceremony was held on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, 6 weeks after the flood, in the community center parking lot. Transformed with a small stage, colorful bunting, and rows of folding chairs already filled with curious townsfolk eager to witness the unusual event, Emma wore her best dress for the occasion, her blonde hair pulled back with matching ribbons. Daisy freshly bathed, her golden coat gleaming in the sunshine, a new blue collar around her neck. Are you nervous? Sarah asked, straightening Emma's dress as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Emma shook her head. Daisy's not nervous, so I'm not either. She looked down at the puppy sitting calmly at her feet. She knows this is important, but she doesn't understand why everyone's making such a fuss. She was just doing what she was supposed to do. Mark smiled at his daughter's assessment. That's what makes heroes special. Princess, they don't think What they're doing is extraordinary. They just do what needs to be done. Dr. Winters, the head of the County Veterinary Association, approached the microphone on the small stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this special ceremony. Today we're here to recognize an extraordinary act of heroism. From a most unexpected hero, the crowd quieted as Dr. Winters continued. Many of you have heard the remarkable story of how a 4-month-old golden retriever puppy named Daisy somehow knew that 7-year-old Emma Anderson had left her house during the worst storm in our county's history. How this puppy tracked Emma through the darkness, found her at a distant tree fort, and stayed with her through the night, ultimately helping guide her to safety when floodwaters threatened them both. Murmurs rippled through the audience, many still astonished by the details of the story, even after hearing it multiple times. Dr. Winters gestured toward where Emma stood with Daisy. I've been a veterinarian for 30 years, and I've never encountered a case of such exceptional intuition, intelligence, and devotion, especially in a puppy so young it defies conventional explanation. Emma squeezed Daisy's leash gently. Hear that, girl? You're exceptional. Daisy looked up at Emma, her tail wagging gently, as if to say she already knew that, the Anderson family and Emma. Please join me on stage, Dr. Winters invited, along with your remarkable dog. Mark, Sarah Liam, and Emma made their way up the steps, Daisy walking perfectly at Emma's side without pulling on the leash or becoming distracted by the crowd, her focus absolute, her behavior impeccable, as if she understood the solemnity of the occasion. Emma, would you like to tell everyone a little about what happened that night? Dr. Winters asked, holding the microphone toward the girl. Emma nodded, taking the microphone with confidence that surprised her parents. Daisy knew I was missing when everyone else was asleep. She tried to wake up my family, but the storm was too loud, so she came to find me. All by herself. Emma's voice grew stronger as she continued. She found me at the tree fort and stayed all night, even though the water kept rising and it was cold and scary. She showed me how to get to safety when the tree started to fall. She pushed me away from dangerous places and found the path home. Emma looked down at Daisy, who sat attentively at her feet. Daisy's not just a regular dog. She sees things other dogs don't. She understands things in a special way. Emma handed the microphone back to Dr. Winters. Her piece said. The veterinarian smiled at Emma's straightforward account. Thank you, Emma, for sharing your experience. She turned to address the audience. In recognition of Daisy's extraordinary actions, the County Veterinary Association presents this special commendation for heroism, along with a lifetime supply of veterinary care at any clinic in the county. Dr. Winters knelt to place a medal attached to a blue ribbon around Daisy's neck, the puppy sitting perfectly, still during the process as if understanding its significance. We also have something for Emma. She continued, producing a second, smaller medal. A matching Medal of Courage for a brave little girl who survived an incredible ordeal. Emma accepted the medal, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, but Daisy's the real hero. She saved me. The audience broke into applause, many rising to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation for the girl and her dog as cameras flashed, capturing the moment for the local newspaper and family albums. Following the ceremony, the Andersons were approached by numerous well-wishers, many wanting to pet Daisy or hear more details of the rescue, Bob Wilson and his wife among them. How's that special puppy doing? Emma asked immediately. The dark gold one that liked Daisy. Mrs. Wilson smiled, growing stronger every day. Still the adventurous one of the litter, always the first to try something new. Have you named her yet? Emma inquired. The Wilsons exchanged glances. Actually, we were thinking of calling her Courage after today's ceremony, if that's all right with you folks. Emma's face lit up. That's perfect. Daisy would approve, right, girl? Daisy wagged her tail as if in agreement as the crowd began to disperse. Captain Reynolds from the rescue team approached. Quite a ceremony, he commented. Well-deserved recognition. Mark shook the firefighter's hand. "We can never thank you enough for your part in the rescue." Reynolds shook his head. "We just provided the boat. The real rescue was already underway, thanks to that remarkable dog." He knelt to Daisy's level, examining the medal, now hanging from her collar. "Suits you, hero." Daisy accepted the attention, calmly, her eyes eventually returning to Emma, as always. Her primary focus. "We're building a memorial," Emma announced to the firefighter, "where the oak tree used to stand. Dad's helping me." Reynolds looked to Mark, who nodded confirmation. Emma wanted something permanent to mark what happened there, Mark explained. "We're using wood from the fallen oak to create a bench and a marker." "Sounds fitting," Reynolds approved. A place to remember that evening. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the Anderson family made their way to the site of the fallen oak tree, now cleared of debris. The massive trunk cut into usable lumber, some of which had already been transformed into a simple bench positioned to overlook the now peaceful creek. "It's nearly finished," Mark said proudly as they approached. "Just needs the plaque Emma designed." The bench stood solid and beautiful on a small rise, safe from any future flooding its surface, sanded smooth, its edges rounded with care. Emma ran her hand along the polished wood. "It's perfect, Dad. Exactly right." Sarah spread a blanket on the ground beside the bench, laying out a simple picnic dinner. "I thought we might eat out here tonight, celebrate Daisy's special day." As they ate, watching the sunset reflect on the Fout Creek surface, Emma grew contemplative. "Do you think Daisy remembers everything? The storm, the flood, the rescue?" Mark considered the question, watching as Daisy explored the area, occasionally returning to check on Emma. "I think she remembers the important parts, not the details, but the feelings, the connection between you." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer. "She'll always be my hero, Dad, even when she's old and gray and can't run anymore." "And you'll always be hers," Mark replied. "That's the thing about true heroes. Their stories never really end. They become part of who we are." As darkness fell, they gathered their belongings. Preparing to return to the house, Emma lingered for a moment at the bench, Daisy beside her, both looking out over the creek, now silvered by moonlight. "Come on, you two," Sarah called. "Time to head home." Emma and Daisy turned together, the puppy now nearly double her size from the night of the storm, but still unmistakably the same devoted companion who had defied the elements to find her girl. Together, they walked toward the waiting family, Daisy's medal, catching the moonlight with each step, a small but powerful reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes come in the most unexpected packages. "You know what, Mom?" Emma said as they walked hand in hand toward home, Daisy trotting contentedly beside them. "I think Daisy was always meant to be my dog, like we were supposed to find each other." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "I think you might be right. Some connections seem written in the stars." Ahead of them, Mark and Liam carried the picnic supplies, talking quietly about plans for the farm, the family moving forward together, stronger for having faced the storm. Daisy leading the way, her golden form a beacon in the gathering darkness, guiding them home, just as she had guided Emma that fateful night when everyone slept through the storm. But the puppy knew she was missing.